Good day. In this day, I'm going to talk about 5 behavioral pitfalls, or simply put, why it's less easy than most candidates realize to hide stuff from their interviewers. Okay. The first scenario is when you work in a toxic workplace, right? You didn't like your boss, or maybe you didn't like your colleagues in your previous role, and you sometimes have flashbacks of those experiences. Now, what happens here in job interviews, you're likely going to get asked questions: how do you handle conflict, right? And whereas you have a subconscious bias, I really did not like that workplace, you will be inclined to use examples from there because that's what's closest to your memory, that's where your flashbacks are. And the problem with this approach is that those answers of you dealing with conflict situations will never come across as too positive. It will never be to your strength, because the workplace was a toxic one. So how can you sell yourself as being someone dealing well with interpersonal skills during job interviews? Unlikely, right? So what I would recommend you here is to seriously consider this scenario, whether you have this problem of a toxic workplace, and if you do, try to make peace with yourself, try to get over it, and simply try to find better examples of your conflict resolution skills, or even working in teams, right? The second scenario I'd like to share with you would be: today's job market is not a candidate-driven one, so it's quite likely for candidates to look for jobs not primarily because they like those roles. Now, the challenge is that a lack of authenticity, or you trying to fake your dream or passion for the role that you're applying for, will show to an experienced interviewer. Okay, the simplest example would be when asked, why do you want to work here? And you would go with something, generic compliment for that specific company without saying anything interesting. Okay, so the fix would be, of course, to try to find something more convincing when asked, why do you want to join this company? And what I would also like to suggest you with the authenticity thing would be to you yourself trying to be more authentic in these job interviews, because selling yourself and bluffing in job interviews, that is no longer as efficient as most candidates realize, right? The third thing I'd like to talk about here would be stress shows, and in job interviews in particular, right? Now, luckily, there's good stress and there's bad stress. Good stress is when you feel anxious about your upcoming job interview, which is quite normal for most people. Now, the problem is the bad stress is primarily exhibited through negativity in the way you communicate your answers, and particularly towards the end of your answers, right? So this is, in my experience coaching people, it can be quite revealing when you talk to someone to determine their levels of stress, right? So long story short, if you do have this problem that you have a tendency to end on a negative note, or you have negativity in your answers, try to revise your story bank and think about how positivity sells best in job interviews, right? Because if you put yourself in your interviewer's shoes, you wouldn't want to hire someone and share an office with a stressed out candidate, right? The fourth scenario I'd like to share with you here would be with overly scripted interview answers. Okay, so what happens here is not very common, but it does happen, is that a focus on trying to be perfect can lead to overly polished or overly rehearsed types of answer, which can erode trust, especially with hiring managers, but with any skilled interviewer, right? Now, why would this happen? Well, if you overly rehearse answers, or if you overly script your interview answers, such as, you always make it a goal to have 30 seconds or less star answers, that's not the recipe for success for most candidates, as far as I know, right? So what's the fix here? Well, try to make them more interesting and try to exhibit a bit more critical thinking, because usually it's not as if candidate wouldn't know their responses come across as a bit scripted, but the problem is that they found out too late, that is during the job interview itself, right? So exhibit a bit more critical thinking and avoid over-scripted responses. And the fifth thing I like to talk about here is discouraged. Okay, so we're all human beings. We all have biases, and it's oftentimes that interviewers screen your ability to do the job based on how courageous, how confident you are yourself that you can do the job, right? Now, you'll be far more inclined to get discouraged and your performance to decrease towards the second part of your job interview, because what happens is many candidates go full in, to make a very strong first impression, which they cannot hold for a 1 hour straight, right? So their first performance, their elevator pitch will be great, and then towards the end, the situation will drastically differ. So what I would recommend to try to keep your performance uniform throughout the, the 60 or even the 30 minutes nowadays job interviews, because your confidence in your ability to land the job offer will translate to your interviewer's confidence in taking a risk with giving you a positive recommendation, right? So even trying to build confidence to sell it to yourself as such that you must be more positive, more confident in your ability to do the role will help, right? So these were the 5 things I wanted to share with you. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.